What is happening, baby? Welcome back to the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own Fantasy Football Huddle, presented as always by DanklyfeBrand, Let's Talk Sports, and Shank It Golf Brand. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Make sure if you're new to the channel, you subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you always get notified about new content coming out. I know we are coming to the end of the season, but you're always going to be getting that next season information, research started, and it's never too soon. That way you get notified as soon as the research starts coming out. But this week, luckily, there are no buys going into this week. However, we did suffer a few big losses in injury form this week going into week 12. So today we're going to be discussing those week 12 waiver wire ads. Don't forget that now is the time to start those playoff stashes, start those running back handcuffs, making sure you're deep at quarterback. So we're going to go through a lot of different portions of the waiver wire and where we're going to be looking at and how we're going to be looking to make our moves. Now is the time to stack your roster to be as perfect as it can get as you approach these final few weeks of the season. And we're also coming out with a trade episode tomorrow for those who have not hit their trade deadline yet. I know this should be the last week, if not next week, for most every fantasy football league, because we only got about 3 weeks left, everybody. Now is crunch time. So without further ado, let's fill up our cups, roll something up, and get right into the week 12 waiver wire ads. Now, of course, like I said, we took some big losses looking at Joe Burrow being done for the year. Aaron Jones, he has avoided an ACL tear, but it looks like we're going to be without him this week. Ken Walker, K9, as some of our viewers like to call him, is going to be out this week, unlikely to play on a short week, even though he might have missed a major injury. Devon A-Chain, can we trust him or not? So many questions going into such an important week, so these waiver ads are going to be very important. Obviously, one of the biggest losses is Mark Andrews from the Baltimore Ravens being done for the season. Luckily, Isaiah Likely has plenty of upside, and not many people handcuff their tight end. So I would be looking to go ahead and grab Isaiah Likely. Even if I didn't lose Mark Andrews and I'm looking for an upgrade at the tight end position, Isaiah Likely is likely going to be a great add for your roster this week. That's the first addition in one of our most important additions this week. Another important addition, if he's still available in your league, is going to be Zach Charbonnet from the Seattle Seahawks. Things were already trending in a good direction for Charbonnet. His rookie snap share this season has been up to about 50% over these last few weeks, and he's been playing a majority of the third downs. With Kenneth Walker going down with an injury, you're looking at him likely to not be playing on Thanksgiving on this Thursday against the Niners. It's going to be a tough matchup this week, so you're going to be wondering whether you start Zach Charbonnet against such a tough run defense or not. However, he's worth an ad, wondering how long Kenneth Walker is going to be out. Even though it doesn't seem he's going to be out very long, you wonder what his snap share is going to look like when he comes back. So Zach Charbonnet is worth definitely adding to your roster. Another addition, if you're struggling at the quarterback position after losing Joe Burrow, is going to be Gardner Minshew for this week. I'm looking at him more of as a streaming option this week. He has an ideal matchup against the Buccaneers. They've surrendered over 1,200 yards and 7 passing touchdowns to quarterbacks over the past 4 weeks alone, not the whole season. Brock Purdy, CJ Stroud, and Josh Allen all finished as QB2 or better in those games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're looking at him coming fresh off a bye, and you should be able to trust him on a safe fantasy floor this week. Then you're also looking at him in the playoffs, having a favorable schedule against Atlanta and Las Vegas in weeks 16 and 17. So Gardner Minshew may be on your roster for longer than you think. Another good streaming option this week if you need help at wide receiver while you wait for Justin Jefferson to come back, while you figure out what the fuck is going on with Cooper Kupp. You can look at Odell Beckham Jr. from the Baltimore Ravens. He's been coming on strong for the last couple of weeks, and he's been leading all Baltimore wide receivers with 15 targets, 2 touchdowns, and over 200 receiving yards over the past 3 games. OBJ exploded for 116 yards on Thursday versus the Bengals, and I'm willing to bet that with Mark Andrews going out, Isaiah Likely is going to get a ton of targets, but Odell Beckham's veteran presence on that roster may bode well for him to get a lot more targets than he's been receiving already through these last few weeks. Odell Beckham should not remain on the waiver wire. The Ravens receiver also has favorable playoff matchups as well. We're going to be looking at another player to put on our roster, potentially even putting him in our lineup this week. I've been talking about him for weeks, y'all. Demario Douglas from the New England Patriots. He's been in this column. Like I said, he's been on these videos for multiple weeks as a top wide receiver target. Yet he is still under 40% rostered, so there's still a good chance you can go out and get him this week, putting together 6 catches, 84 receiving yards on 9 targets the week before the bye, and finishing with double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. There shouldn't be any more wide receiver questions about Demario Douglas. He's the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. His last game that he played in New England was the best game for his career, despite being limited with an ankle injury. So I'm all in on Demario Douglas, especially after getting all that rest in his bye week. I'm also really liking the Green Bay Packers receivers. Romeo Doubs may still be out there, but Jaden Reed having higher than 50% availability in most leagues. He's got 80 plus yards in 3 of his last 4 games, including 3 rushes as a running back for 46 yards and a touchdown this last Sunday. All 3 carries came before Aaron Jones went out with the injury, so you could expect him to get a lot more carries, as A.J. Dillon has shown to not be very trustworthy this season. He's a slot wide receiver who currently leads all Packers with 463 yards this season, and to get even more involved in this offense, getting that RB1 conversation and usage, not going to lie to you, Jaden Reed may be the most valuable Green Bay Packer on the roster at this current moment, especially with Luke Musgrave being out. I like Jaden Reed a ton. Brandon Cooks for the Dallas Cowboys is also worth an add. He has 21% of the team's receiving yards across the past 3 games, and he has an 81% catch rate. CeeDee Lamb garners all of that attention from the defense, which leaves Brandon Cooks fairly open most of the time. He does have one of the best schedules remaining for wide receivers, especially in the playoffs. Look over at Brandon Cooks. Last wide receiver we're going to be talking about on this list today is going to be Josh Downs from the Indianapolis Colts. He suffered a knee injury in week 9 that kept him a little limited. However, he's coming off a bye. He should be fresh. And this matchup with the Buccaneers could not be much better for this rookie wide receiver who's already having a breakout season. He's finished with double-digit fantasy points in 5 games before his injury in week 9, and he's one of Gardner Minshew's favorite targets. So I like adding Josh Downs, especially if you pair him with Gardner Minshew as a potential nice matchup addition on your bench there. Going back into the running back position, I've been talking about TyJay Spears for a long time here on these videos. The Titans have one of the best remaining running back schedules. You're seeing Houston twice and Seattle once, weeks 15 through 17. This is your chance to roster a handcuff with a ton of upside who can also have some standalone value. TyJay Spears is the perfect handcuff. You can use him if you need to, and if Derrick Henry goes down, TyJay Spears might potentially be a league winner for you in the playoffs. I also talked about Ty Chandler from the Vikings last week. They weren't without Alexander Mattison last week, but if you added Ty Chandler and you listened to this video last week, you were so happy that you did so. As a result of getting Ty Chandler, you were looking at him getting those 74 yards rushing as well as his 37 yards receiving. And this matchup this week is even better than it was last week with how he played. You gotta believe he's getting some carries and has carved out his own role in this offense. That's going to be it for the running back position. More quarterbacks to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Derek Carr from the New Orleans Saints. He's available in more than 80% of leagues, and in 2 quarterback leagues, where if you're missing Joe Burrow or if you lost Joe Burrow. I mean, like, I know myself, I drafted Kirk Cousins and Joe Burrow in 1 league, so I'm struggling to find a quarterback. Derek Carr might be added to that roster specifically going into tonight's waiver wires. The Saints have favorable matchups coming over the next few weeks. They face an Atlanta team that's allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks across the last 4 games. And Derek Carr has finished as a top 15 quarterback for 5 weeks before leaving with a shoulder injury in week 10. The Saints had a bye week last week, so you're looking at him getting that good rest. So I like Derek Carr and what he can also do coming through these next few weeks and getting you through the playoffs as a nice backup option. I also still like Will Levis from the Tennessee Titans in deeper leagues. If you need a stash player, I would consider adding Will Levis for your playoff push. He's looking alive, and he's making the Titans look better than they have all season. He completed 76% of his passes for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars this past week. This matchup with the Texans and the Seahawks coming up will likely follow a similar pattern for Willie Mayonnaise. You're looking at the Titans playing catch up against these 2 teams most likely, and can deliver similar results that he did this week. If you need help at the tight end position, I already mentioned Isaiah Likely, but Cade Otton, my boy Cotton, I've talked about him a ton of times. He caught 4 of his 5 targets this last few weeks, and he's run the 9th most routes among tight ends this season. He's got a favorable playoff schedule with Green Bay, Jacksonville, and New Orleans through weeks 15 through 17. So I like adding Cotton if you think you might need a nice tight end stash going into the playoffs. Some other players to consider rostering on your roster going into week 12. Looking at quarterbacks, Jake Browning, potentially worth an add, and stashing Aaron Rodgers, seeing if he comes back from injured reserve right smack dab in the middle of your fantasy playoffs. If you're looking at running backs to potentially add, Kenneth Gainwell has been getting some good carries from the Philadelphia Eagles, and Leonard Fournette still looks like he might be able to sign to a playoff contending team come December. Wide receiver help, Romeo Doubs, as I mentioned before, and Rondale Moore may be available as well. If you still need help at tight end, Michael Mayer, Hunter Henry, and Jonnu Smith should be available in your league. Go out and grab them. That's going to do it for today's waiver wire episode. Make sure you fill your roster in all of the correct spots and get rid of all of that excess fat you got going into that playoff push, because now is the time to be as aerodynamic as possible and as efficient as possible. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Like I said before, we got a trade episode coming up in the next day or so. We also got our stardoms and situms. We got a ton of episodes coming out for you guys, and the season's not done yet. So make sure you shout out your boy to some of your friends. Even if you don't want to shout it out to your league mates, I know you know somebody that plays fantasy football. So let them know about the Huddle Chat Sports Show. As always, keep your chins up and your attitudes down. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.